Tonight we begin with the story of the American dream, the family home. For generations that dream has been built with wood, much of it from Canada. A steady flow of lumber has crossed the border, framing our houses and building our communities. But now, that relationship faces its greatest test. The US government has imposed heavy tariffs on Canadian wood, aiming to protect American timber jobs. The goal: make American lumber more competitive. But the reality is far more complicated. The US is deeply dependent on Canadian lumber. We simply don't produce enough to meet demand. For decades, this trade has been a cornerstone of our partnership with Canada. Without this supply, the US home building industry faces a critical shortage. The government's tough talk is colliding with a tough reality. The very policy designed to help one part of the economy could end up hurting another, much larger one. This isn't the first time the two nations have clashed over lumber, but this time feels different. The rhetoric is sharper, the actions more aggressive, and the consequences more severe. The US claims Canadian provinces unfairly subsidize their timber industry. Canada denies this, calling US actions protectionist. The conflict is reaching a boiling point. As of July 2025, the effects are real, felt in lumber yards, at construction sites, and in the wallets of American families. The price of a 2x4 is climbing, builders face delays, and homeownership is becoming more expensive. This is more than a political disagreement, it's a growing economic crisis threatening the US economy. How did we get here and what comes next? The latest chapter began with a bold move from Washington. In early 2025, the US finalized steep tariffs on most Canadian softwood lumber imports, adding over 20% to costs. The message: make Canadian wood more expensive and protect American sawmills. But the US didn't stop at tariffs. Officials also threatened quotas, hard limits on imports. For US home builders, this was a nightmare. Even if they could pay higher prices, they might not get the lumber at all. The threat of quotas sent shockwaves through the construction industry. Canada responded forcefully, condemning the US actions as unfair and illegal under international law. Ottawa announced retaliatory tariffs targeting key American products: steel, beef, and consumer goods. Canada is also considering its own quotas, restricting lumber exports to the US. It's a high-stakes standoff. The US squeezes Canada with tariffs, and Canada threatens to squeeze back by limiting supply. The result? A trade war, with American home builders and consumers caught in the middle. Both sides are digging in for a long fight. The lines are drawn, and the stakes are rising. This isn't just about lumber, it's about economic leverage and political will. The fallout is spreading far beyond the forests. The question: who will blink first? For now, the only certainty is uncertainty, and the costs are mounting. The numbers tell the story. Before the tariffs, Canada supplied nearly a third of all softwood lumber used in the US, enough to frame millions of homes. The new tariffs have already added over $14,000 to the price of a new single-family home. This is hitting at a time when the US faces a severe housing affordability crisis. Interest rates are up, inventory is tight, and now lumber costs are soaring. Renovators and DIYers feel it too. Retailers like Home Depot and Lowe's are passing on higher costs. Last year, the US imported over 14 billion board feet of Canadian lumber. American sawmills can't fill the gap. They're constrained by labor shortages and limited capacity. Even with US mills running full tilt, the supply gap remains. When supply is restricted and demand stays high, prices go up, fast. The futures market for lumber is volatile, with traders betting on even tighter supplies. Small builders are being squeezed the most, delaying projects, laying off workers, and risking closure. The impact is real, immediate, and widespread. This isn't just a problem for big developers. It's a crisis for families, workers, and communities across America. The dream of homeownership is slipping further out of reach, and the pressure is only building. This isn't just another trade dispute, it's a structural crisis for US housing. For decades, American home building relied on a stable supply of Canadian lumber. That assumption is now broken. High tariffs and looming quotas are forcing a painful shift in the industry. Delays in lumber shipments throw construction timelines into chaos, driving up labor and financing costs. Builders are scaling back, and fewer new homes are being built, just when more are needed. If the dispute drags on, builders may have to switch to alternatives like steel or concrete, costly, slow, and disruptive. Retooling the industry would take years and require retraining millions of workers. The seamless cross-border supply chain is unraveling. What was once a reliable partnership is now a source of risk and friction. The cracks are showing in the very structure of our homes. This is not a temporary disruption, it's the fracturing of a foundational economic relationship. The consequences could last for decades. The US and Canada's construction industries were deeply intertwined. Now that integration is at risk, and the future of American home building hangs in the balance. As Canadian lumber becomes scarce and expensive, can others fill the gap? The answer, not quickly or easily. US mills are already near capacity, limited by years of consolidation and labor shortages. Building new sawmills takes years and major investment. Imports from Europe are a fraction of what Canada supplies, and shipping costs are much higher. European producers face their own constraints and can't simply redirect supply. Canada's timber industry is uniquely designed to serve the US. No other country has the same scale or integration. The species, dimensions, and logistics all match US needs. Replacing this supply chain is a monumental task. The result? A self-inflicted supply shock driving up costs and delaying projects. The US home building industry is paying the price. Canada isn't waiting for the US to change course. Facing tariffs, it's pivoting to new markets, especially in Asia. Countries like Japan, China, and South Korea are eager for Canadian wood. The Canadian government is funding trade missions and negotiating new deals. Every shipment to Asia is one less for US builders. Canada is also moving up the value chain, exporting more finished wood products. This shift makes the Canadian industry more resilient and less dependent on the US. Even if the dispute ends, Canada won't abandon its new markets. The era of cheap, abundant Canadian lumber for the US may be over. The US may win the tariff battle, but risks losing its most important supplier. The lumber war's impact goes far beyond timber. Canadian border towns are seeing fewer American shoppers, and a buy Canadian sentiment is rising. US border businesses are hurting, and industries tied to housing, windows, doors, appliances, are feeling the pinch. US trucking and rail companies are losing revenue as lumber shipments drop. The conflict is souring public opinion and eroding trust between the two countries. Canadian companies are rethinking US investments, wary of future instability. The deep economic and cultural ties are fraying. Tariffs may protect a few US sawmills, but they inflict widespread pain. American consumers pay more, retailers lose customers, and transportation companies lose business. The ripple effects are everywhere. In a global economy, trade barriers build walls where there were once bridges. Everyone loses in this trade war. The lumber dispute is part of a larger trend, tariffs and trade battles on many fronts. This multi-front trade war is a headwind for the US economy. Wall Street is watching. Home builder and supplier stocks are volatile, and investment is slowing. The biggest threat is to housing affordability, a pillar of the US economy. As costs rise, families have less to spend elsewhere, dragging down growth. The Federal Reserve faces a dilemma. Inflation is up, but so is the risk of recession. Political pressure to protect US jobs is strong, but the economic pain is growing. The path forward is uncertain, compromise or escalation. A new agreement could stabilize the market, but more tariffs could deepen the crisis. The choices made now will have lasting consequences. The longer the dispute drags on, the greater the risk of permanent damage. The US housing market, and its partnership with Canada, hang in the balance. Urgent action is needed before it's too late.